guys don't worry. It doesn't have you guys, just us.
Yeah. All right. We're live. Welcome everybody to Ask Joe Anything Live. We're now streaming on Twitch, LinkedIn Live, and YouTube. While we have an audience here live as well, so we're going to be going through basically in an accelerated format of Ask Joe Anything Live that I do on YouTube. It's a series, so I've been doing it for quite a while now. Everyone that you see on my panel that I'll introduce here in a second has been a guest on that show for the most part, with the exception of Anna, but we're working on getting her in a little bit later. We ran out of time. So with that, let's get started with some slides. I've only got like 2, but I did need to set some things up here, some housekeeping, right, legal notice things. Obviously, we will allow you to ask us anything, but we may not be able to answer everything, right? So some things we may need to kind of push off to the sessions after this with PM, where you can ask PM anything about items on the roadmap or what's coming in the future. So we'll have to kind of avoid those questions. But if you're not familiar with Ask Joe Anything, it's a monthly live stream. Our next one is scheduled for mid-June right now, so you can go and in a couple weeks and check out and see what's planned for that. The format is a fun format, right? It's very casual, 2 hours long. We basically have a fun discussion for an hour, check out some new things based on the topic of the discussion. We get a little bit technical, talk about life a little bit, and then in the second hour, we turn it over to the live chat in the stream, and we start answering questions from whoever joins. And those questions don't necessarily need to be tied to a specific topic. They can be about anything. And we're going to hold that true here too. So earlier I had somebody asking me about how many stars are in the galaxy. Can't answer that question for you, but you can ask it, right? So that's the fun stuff here. All of the different URLs for where we're streaming today is up on the TV. Hopefully there's people watching in the cyber arena now who couldn't make it into the room. But with that, let's introduce our, I don't know why there's an agenda there, our panelists. So here's a man who's just ahead of the curve. He's defining it. He's not just ahead of the curve, he's defining it. Sorry, James, I already messed it up. I'm not used to reading off of index cards. Fortunately, though, my daughter put these together because I typically will just throw them away and wing it, but she's keeping me organized here today. So from crafting the CyberArk blueprint for identity security success to mastering the nuances of cybersecurity policy, he keeps the digital world safe one policy at a time. When it comes to protecting your identity in the cloud or on the ground, he's your go-to expert. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome James Creamer.
All right.
Now here's someone who understands the intricacies of DevOps better than he understands his own handwriting. From Kubernetes to secret management, he's got the tools and the talent to secure the software lifecycle at every turn. If there's a security solution for DevOps, he's not just on it, he's ahead of it. Please welcome Darren Kahn. With a career dedicated to ensuring the digital identity is as secure as Fort Knox, here's a man who's seen every side of identity and access management, and then some. Leading the charge in a world where your digital credentials are more valuable than gold, he's the expert you trust to keep the keys safe. Let's give a big round of applause for Jared Brodsky. Now, this guy is an architect of cloud security, transforming potential cyber threats into solid defense strategies. With a mastery in securing the cloud environments and an eye for the next big threat, he's the ally you want on your side when navigating the complexities of cloud security. Everyone, please put your hands together for Mike Bycat. Coming straight from Toronto, here's a leader who's revolutionizing the way we protect our identities online. She's at the forefront of implementing CyberArk's latest innovations and improving security and user experience. When it comes to safeguarding your digital life, she's already a step ahead. Please give a warm welcome to Anna Managal. Now, just take a moment here and imagine someone who can make endpoint security sound as exciting as a blockbuster movie. With 2 decades in the security industry, he's turned the challenge of managing vulnerabilities into an art form. Whether it's endpoint security or privilege management, he knows how to lock it down. Let's welcome Fran Yang. All right, so we're going to start with Darren. Darren, considering Kubernetes' growing popularity, what security challenges do you foresee for organizations adopting Kubernetes at scale?
You know, that's a fantastic question, Joe. One I get all the time. Kubernetes, man, it could really seem like this big, scary thing that just keeps growing and growing and growing out there. But I'm here to tell you, right, after going through all the knowledge and documentation, and by the way, I do read the Kubernetes documentation for fun, so I am a bit of a weirdo when it comes to this thing, but it is a very powerful tool. And it shouldn't be taken lightly from all the areas that can impact you from a security perspective. But just like everything else, I want you to think about how you go about securing anything that you've been doing. What's the human access? What's the machine access? What are the points that people get in? And just make a game out of it. Pick out all those points. Now, something you said for, how do I know those points? Well, we can help you with that, right? Find those key areas that you may not have thought about that requires a little bit more Kubernetes knowledge. But again, bring it back to how you know to secure anything. If it's a Windows machine, a Linux machine, how do you secure it? Well, the user accounts, who's accessing it, times, and how can you get reporting on it. Take those exact same things and just apply it to Kubernetes. The mechanism might be a little different, but we still want to hit those same targets every single time. And the thing that is going to make this seem like it has a lot more pressure to it is the potential scale. When someone says I got 1,000 pods running and 15 or 20 or 30 different clusters all over the place, that can seem like Mount Everest, a daunting task. But don't focus on the entirety of it, right? The same can be said if you have 10,000 Linux or Windows machines. That can seem like a daunting task, but you know I need to break it down and just focus on those particular goals: human access, machine access, and then start with that process. Same exact thing. And like I said, we can help you. We have a lot of nice free resources, right? I'll underscore the free part there, that can help you with a lot of this stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, Darren.
I can be Jared. It's
this
okay.
This is my first time moderating.
Here you go, Darren.
Okay, so I'm just going to throw that out there. I'm getting ahead of myself. But Jared, tying into Darren's discussion about Kubernetes, how does identity management need to evolve to handle such distributed technologies?
That's a great question. I thought we were here to talk about peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
I don't know if anybody saw the episode with Jared, but we did spend a little bit too much time talking about PB&Js on the live stream. So,
can you repeat that question?
Sure. Yeah, dude. We're trying to tie into Darren's discussion here about how identity management needs to evolve to deal with distributed systems or even distributed people.
Yeah. So identity management, is one of those necessary evils that we deal with on a regular basis, right? Talking about privilege creep, talking about toxic combinations, talking about all the things that typically aren't the most exciting things that we deal with on a regular basis. A lot of this identity management stuff is things that we absolutely need to do for either compliance purposes, because the auditors are asking for it, for any number of reasons. So the idea of identity, of what we can do around identity management is taking a look at things where, in some cases, identity management, we do a lot of it for compliance reasons. But what you have to think about is when we're doing it for compliance reasons were typically developed for, for some sort of legal, entity. And compliance doesn't always necessarily have security in mind. Right, so even though we're checking boxes around identity management for compliance to meet SOX or whatever else it may be, these aren't developed with the principle of least privilege in mind. To make sure that you're doing your access reviews, you make sure that you have people that managers that aren't just rubber stamping, they're good, they have all the access, whatever and we have the box check. That doesn't necessarily lead to a secure environment. So again, so that's some of it on identity management. The second part about identity management that we keep kind of evolving on, and really, it's never, there's no done necessarily, right? Just like when any kind of privileged access management, or we're talking about identity security, it's a constant process, right? You're just gonna keep on doing it, and you gotta have that program in place to do it. But it's how much of it can we automate, right? It's all about taking out as much human element from it, manual tasks that can get screwed up, having to go through ticketing to make, provisioning, greenfield access to new users, birthright access, and just making sure that we can go either using different attributes to automate it, or going through and making sure that we're really, from the moment a new employee or a new user or new vendor is brought into that organization, everything that happens downstream based on whatever those attributes are captured, let's say in your HR system, trickle down, and all that provisioning automatically gets done. So it's, again, right, being able to establish not just the technical, how do you do it, right? The technical part is usually easier to implement than getting the people to make the decisions to what the policy is that then trickle down, that the technology will then enforce. So it's a kind of combination. It's a business thing that we need to look at, followed by the automation, of making sure that all the identities fall into the right categories, and we're doing things properly.
Thanks, Jared. So Francis, based on Jared's points about identity management and remote settings, could you discuss how least privilege policies are particularly effective or even challenging in those environments?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the major design goals behind privilege management, at least from an endpoint point of view, is we want to manage how admin rights gets passed to a user. In an ideal state, you want the users to have the least amount of privilege to start with and be able to give them the privileges that they need as they call up applications in order to do whatever activity they'd like to do. In the past, it has been very difficult to do something like this because admin rights are needed almost everywhere. And how do you break apart what applications you're going to give admin rights to? And the traditional security tools that are out there, particularly EDR, they're functioning mostly on the desire to block, not necessarily the desire to grant. So in a situation where you want to try to secure the endpoint, but you also want to make it operationally efficient for the user, you don't want to take away all the user's admin rights. You have to find a way to give the user the ability to run things as admin. And that is the core goal that we're hoping to achieve with EPM.
Awesome. Do you mind delving in a little bit to the challenges and benefits of implementing a least privilege policy as well?
Yeah, so with any environment, the policies that you create for a particular user or a particular computer falls on what are the applications, what are the executables that you want to add to a particular policy. So the ability to give someone admin rights for something specific or something granular largely depends on how flexible this application is that we're going to be elevating. And if it's possible to elevate only certain portions of it, that's great. A lot of applications, however, in this world are monolithic. So it's all or nothing, and that is something that might change in the future, but in the world that we live in right now, we have to be pragmatic about it. And if it's a choice between giving someone the privileges to do their job versus making it very difficult for them to do their job, coming from a security background early on, I thought that being as secure as possible was the goal. But what I quickly realized is that users will fight you, and you will end up having all kinds of problems trying to actually implement a security strategy if you don't include them in the process.
Thanks, Fran. And following up on Francis's focus on just policy implementation in general, how does secure browser support or enhance those least privileged principles?
So everybody heard about the secure browser? People that are in the room? Awesome. Secure browser can help organizations to enforce least privilege in a few different ways. So we start by, we can say first of all, can I just make a comment? Browsers typically were built for people they didn't start to be a working tool. They started to be something for you to go shopping, or not before shopping, just to browse the internet, read about things, and you start getting the news and things, and evolve to shopping and things like that. And now we're getting users, or we're letting users to use that same tool that they use for their personal lives, or they use to go to see the news or things like that, to have access to very privileged information. So that brings us challenge, right? You didn't ask me, but being able to do post-authentication protection is big on our workforce side, which is what Jared and I work with. So the browser will help with that as well. And you can also have a policy where you say, okay, this browser, the secure browser, is used for work. So we are going to only allow you to access the applications that you need for your work in this browser. And if you want to go check your personal email and that is allowed, you can use Chrome, or you can use Edge, or whatever other browser you want. We can also help customers with letting them assigning certain applications that the user is allowed to, and then having process where the user can request other applications and things like that. So the important thing about the browser is that it helps secure the whole environment, and it ties to every solution that CyberArk has to enhance its own security. So the browser itself has its security, removing cookie, making the policies more secure, etc. But that's just part of the puzzle. It helps you secure every other CyberArk solution because it's an interface to the user. Did I answer the question?
You answered the question and like every other question I had for you.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. You're very thorough in your answers, but can you kind of touch on maybe for like 30 seconds why CyberArk identified the need to launch a secure browser?
Oh, okay. So it's a little bit of what I heard and a little bit of speculation, but our labs and red team, you guys know CyberArk has a red team and has labs, right? So the red team does attack, and the labs also they do lots of investigation. We started noticing that even though many organizations now are implementing MFA, are making passwords more secure, are requesting users to change their passwords, etc. Attackers are they found an easier way. When they infect a machine because they phish the user or something like that, they go after the cookies, because if they hijack your cookies, the browser cookies, they bypass all that MFA. It doesn't matter what type of biometric, non-biometric, what type of MFA you put on in front of a browser. If you have that cookie, you have that session, you impersonate that person. Also, CyberArk has for some time now have secure web sessions. Anyone use it, knows what it is. It allows us to protect and do step recording and things like that. So that development team wanted to do more things, that other functionality, but not just things that was impossible to implement just with an extension. So, and then because of that, we decided to go into the secure browser space. But we are the only company that have a secure browser focused on identity security. So we are not, it's not for proxy, it's for securing identities, securing passwords, and securing the whole environment. So it's useful not just to put in front of CyberArk own products, which I highly recommend, but also if you have like your CrowdStrike, am I allowed to say other companies? Any of our security tools, it's a good idea to protect how users access to. And another thing is many of our customers, so I work with all customers, and my focus is Canadian customers, from the financial large institutions to smaller, because I'm what CyberArk calls an overlay, like a specialist in an identity space. And I work with people that say, no one can, you need to have a computer that is like a managed computer and only can access from a managed computer. And then I have other customers that allow BYOD, allow people to bring their own computers. Friend can't help those cases, right? Because there is no EPM on a personal computer. But when you have the browser, at least the browser has, we can make it more secure when we can protect the whole endpoint. So if you want to keep using, for example, Chrome, Friend here can help you protect those cookies if the computer is managed. But if the computer is not managed, it's game over for Friend. So that's where we come in to help add protection. Okay.
Sorry, Fran.
Thank
Game over. for
Sorry,
you.
Fran.
It just goes to say, you can't rely on just one tool to secure your organization.
It's about security
There-
layers.
Absolutely, 100%.
Awesome. Mike, reflecting on Anna's explanation of the secure browser and its impact on identity security, how do cloud environments benefit from such security tools, especially in the context of remote work?
Yeah, fantastic question. And it kind of adds on to what you heard from Anna and Fran about the end user and making sure you have the right level of control, but also end user experience. My word for that is empathy, right? So any kind of tools that we can provide that will give you the right level of security, but improve or at least not hamper the end user experience is going to be a big benefit. And an example of that, how a tool like Secure Browser could transfer into the cloud, is the example Anna gave of it ties into all of the platform. So if you have an end user who needs to go in and get access to AWS, they know that they can securely do that natively through the browser. Yes, it's the CyberArk browser, but that's their one-stop shop for doing these different tasks. We're not having to direct them to the CyberArk end user portal to get access to AWS, Azure, GCP, and then say if you also need access an EC2 instance, you're going to need to pivot over to another area of CyberArk. Have it all streamlined for them in one central place is a big benefit, and it helps with remote access as well, in the sense that a lot of these tools will authenticate you based off of, or all the tools based, you can provide SSO conditional access off your IDP or our own IDP, of course. So you can remove the need for VPNs in a lot of these cases, but still have the trust that they're being secured by meeting conditional access policies before they get access to all this stuff.
So with the shift towards like remote work and even increased cloud adoption, what are the biggest security challenges that organizations face today in cloud environments?
Yeah, I mean, again, empathy. I'm not going to spend much more time on that, but the developer experience. I mean, the biggest feedback I hear from customers when they come talk to us, and a lot of them are just like you, they're CyberArk customers who now have been given the task to secure access to the cloud. It hasn't been their job typically, but now it's in the limelight. It's in the news. It's coming through in breaches, understanding that developers, cloud engineers have all sorts of privileges to everything in the cloud, and so much is running there. So how can you provide a user experience that the developers aren't going to throw tomatoes in your face when you tell them, I'm going to need you to go through a proxy server, and it's going to spin up this other Windows server, and then it's going to launch a browser that you can't control, and then you're not going to be able to click in real time necessarily. And if you want to use your CLI, you need to go check out the password and then input it. And like, wait, what? I'm used to just launching my browser or launching AWS CLI or the Azure CLI for PowerShell and getting my job done. So that is a huge task that is coming from the security perspective of managing all this access in the cloud environment. The next piece is, how do you unravel everything that's already in your cloud environment? Because it was, I think of the analogy in terms of IT security 15 years ago when you're spinning up a firewall, you're not spinning up, but you're setting up a firewall. You need to figure out how to get access to a new subnet or to a new IP address. You might just start off with a star to make sure that it works and let it get done. Like, we have to address this immediately. So let's just allow it instead of having it deny and only allowing the appropriate stuff. And that happened in the cloud environments. We need to get things going to compete with our competitors who might be in front of us. So let's get these developers access. Let's give them admin. They have it across dev, stage, and prod. Doesn't matter. We got to move. And now there's all these identities, whether it's local identities or federated identities or access tokens that exist out there. How do we figure out how to tone that back and then moving forward, have everything kind of tied into pipeline or automation. So you're not doing click ops, trying to continuously secure everything that grows out there.
Awesome answer. James, building on Mike's insights into cloud security challenges, what strategic shifts do you recommend organizations make to stay ahead in cybersecurity policy and practice?
Yeah, it's there's a lot there. Mike was talking about automation and not having to go through click ops, right? I think a big part of staying ahead is leveraging infrastructure as code and other automation tools to do a term that Joe and I like to call security at inception, right? From the moment these new enterprise resources get created, whether it's a new cloud service provider account or a new EC2 instance or a new, long-lived system, whatever it is, that you've tapped into the power of your automation to protect those things immediately, so you're not like having this sort of technical security debt but continue to grow as you create new things, and you feel like you're always playing catch up as a result of it. So definitely doubling down on Mike's point about leveraging automation. But from like a policy perspective, I think what a lot of organizations are struggling with in protecting the cloud right now is one of two things. One, whoever in the organization that is like sprinted into the cloud, as Mike was describing, they're not part of the security organization, right? I talked to like several customers yesterday where this was their scenario where the security organization was literally just left behind in the process. And so now they're trying to like build security policy to bridge the gap to like build those relationships and do something about it. The other thing that I see is that organizations that have been security minded might have written security policy 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and that security policy, thou shalt do this in this way, right, is like too rigid to keep up with the modern, yes, you. It's too rigid for modern enterprise resources and access control methods, right? Or like what we refer to as identity security. And so you might have said 5 years ago, every single privilege session will go through a jump box and be recorded and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And that worked just fine on Windows and Linux infrastructure 5 years ago, right? And, due to attrition, members of the organization changing, leadership changing, whatever the case may be, those policies haven't changed. And then someone comes in and they read the policy and say, this is what we're supposed to do. And then they try to square peg round hole, right? It doesn't work right. And so I think that's one of the big shifts that we're going to start seeing is a lot of security leaders reevaluating how they've created their enterprise security policy to be less rigid and more flexible in nature, to be future thinking. Everything every person on this panel has said so far, like about what controls to apply, all boils down to how do we prevent identity compromise, credential theft, stop lateral and vertical movement, limit privilege escalation and abuse. Like those are the tenets in which security policy should be sort of founded or crafted on. And as long as we do those things in these types of situations, you're developing a much more flexible enterprise security policy to meet whatever comes down the road 2 years from now, right? So I think those are a couple of things that you'll start to see change a lot within, our industry as a whole.
You mentioned, needing to reevaluate security programs. How can organizations shift from a reactive to a proactive security approach as they're doing that reevaluation?
Yeah, so one of the points I mentioned was automation. Like automation is a practical way to get ahead, but a lot of organizations think of like different security tools as a tool, right, and not necessarily as a program. And so what are the processes and people that you're putting behind the tool to make it do something, right? And if you don't have those things, it's not going to work. You're never going to make any progress. And so for anyone who joined my session prior to this, I talked a lot about like process maturity and program maturity, and how do you get from a state of being completely reactive to a state of being continuous improvement and proactive? And it's not something you do overnight, but there's a method to the madness. There are business process maturity tools out there like the CMMI from Carnegie Mellon Institution. We've built a sort of an adaptation of that to help guide organizations through the journey that you go on, because you can't go from being reactive to being in that sort of proactive nirvana state overnight, right? There's a stepping stone. There's a method to that madness. But I think a lot of organizations just aren't aware of some of these other tools that they have at their disposal. And it's not like none of it is reinventing the wheel. Like people have been using these business process maturity models for lots of things that are non-cybersecurity related for a really, really long time. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that, and I encourage more of that, because being able to evaluate yourself in that maturity curve from a process perspective really helps you figure out where are your gaps, what's causing you to be reactive, so you can build your own custom plan to be able to get in front of things, right? I think it's that, and a lot of those processes are around how do people get access to things, when do they get access to things from the point that they're hired, right? That birthright access, I tend to call it cradle to grave identity lifecycle management, right? The moment you're born in the organization, the moment you're dead in the organization.
It's harsh.
Yeah, well, it's the harsh reality, right? That's really important. And then the security at inception concept of the resources themselves, right? Everything that CyberArk does, if you had to like boil it down and like tell it to somebody who's non-security related, has no idea what we do in this space, all we do is allow people and things to access other things in a secure way, right? That is like all identity security is. It's oversimplification. Matt probably doesn't like the way that I describe that, but if you're talking to a non-cybersecurity person, right? Like that's a really good way to describe it. And think about all the processes that are involved in the people and things accessing the other things, and how can we automate a lot of that to make sure that we're getting to a state where we can be proactive and stay ahead of that, security debt curve, and get people back into doing more critical thinking things rather than, to Mike's point earlier, click ops everywhere.
Sweet. Darren,
Yes.
we're gonna finish off with you, dude. We started with you, we're finishing with you.
Awesome.
So James kind of gave us some good advice on strategic approaches, focusing on security at inception and all of these ideas, but how can organizations better integrate security considerations into their DevOps practices?
Yeah, that's one we get all the time, right? And one thing to tie back to the very beginning about Kubernetes, sometimes words can, categorizations that we have, a term DevOps, unknown, fearful, stay away, right? There's a large amount there. And it goes back to that Mount Everest kind of mentality, right? Something different, something new. I'm not quite sure how to handle that. Well, let me break it down for you. I'll spill the ugly truth about it. It's just apps running on a computer somewhere. That's it. There's no, it doesn't matter how many Jenkins nodes you have or Kubernetes nodes or all that. It's just an app running on a machine somewhere. And a lot of people in the industry try to make it seem more complex than that, right? There are more moving pieces to a lot of it. I'll give them that for scale, but it really boils down to, do I know how to secure a machine? Do I know how to secure an application? Then that gives you much of the knowledge you're going to need to go and do these things, right? And it ties in a lot of the things that my colleagues here have been saying, right? The identities on the Kubernetes space. It's something a little different. It's not an Active Directory account. It's not a specific, IDP account, but it's still an account. It's called a service account. Same thing, right? Same exact concept. That's the way that it identifies things inside the cluster. And then you take that same paradigm to every single application. Right? Jenkins user, just an identity. How can we secure an identity, right? You can call Jared and say, this is how we can federate and do all these wonderful things. I know nothing about the IDP space. I just call Jared. He's a telephone between all of us up here, right? But just break it down, right? Take a breath. Think about these things at their heart. It's applications on computers. Don't get frightened with the term DevOps and how fast these guys are talking with various other things and all these acronyms that are out there. I definitely feel like in the DevOps space, the language itself is a barrier to people understanding what is happening. It's definitely one of those types of industries. I'd love to make it different, but I'm guilty of it as well. If anyone's been on a call with me and we start rambling on and on about some engineering thing, I get really happy and I forget all about everything that's happening outside, right? The engineer that's there. So if I leave you with anything about that DevOps, how to tackle this, is to just remember that you already know how to deal with it. It's computers and applications on it. And if I gave anyone here a Windows machine with a PowerShell script or a Linux machine with a Bash script and said, tell me all the things to secure, you'd rattle it off in no time. Exact same thing on the DevOps side, right? But we just have to figure out how we do it without alienating, some of my colleagues mentioned, the developer space, so they know what's going on and they know that we have empathy for them. And that has been something that CyberArk may not have thought a lot about in the earlier years, right? And we're talking 5 years. It was security at the top. As long as you're secure, we don't care how difficult we make their life, right? That was also that's CyberArk ITSec ethos as well, right? So we're working to change that one. But that's not a great way to do stuff, right? We want to bring them in the fold, and as Mike mentioned, have empathy for what we're asking them to do. And a lot of times, the way you get that is just Mr. and Mrs. Developer, Mr. and Mrs. Kubernetes admin or Jenkins admin. What's your concerns in your day, right? How do you feel what I'm telling you is going to negatively affect your day? Because there's a lot of assumptions that get made about they're going to tell me to change, I'm going to lock it down, I won't be able to do my job, I'm going to have to jump through PSM server and jump host, and I won't be able to use my CLI tool. And a lot of times that's not true at all, right? We're not telling you to do that. You're bringing an assumption to our concern as well, which is making you more security and risk minded, and immediately you're starting at odds. So we can just ask that question: what's your concern about what it is I'm asking you to do, or the goals that we have, which is all about security? That common ground is really going to start that conversation on a fantastic foot, instead of they're just going to make my life hard, right? We don't want to make your life hard. And CyberArk, like I said, has put a really big effort into not just the security piece of it, but the operational piece and the empathy piece, right? That's a fantastic word, Mike, for this. A lot of work in that. If you've looked at how we access cloud consoles, it is developer friendly. It's actually less clicks than they're probably doing now, right? We've made their life better if they're willing to give it a shot by us coming in and saying, we just want you to be more secure, and we do not want to hamper you at all, right?
Darren, I want to hear from the most important panelist in the room, which is our entire audience out here. So why don't we switch gears, and we'll take questions from the audience for any of the panelists here, and we'll also take questions from live chat as well. This whole time we've been getting questions in through the live stream's live chat. So if anybody has a question, please raise your hand. We've got a microphone to bring you. We'll get to those questions, and we'll kind of go back and forth between the live chat and our live audience. So first question.
Hey, Joe. So I'm going to get a very tactical question. As much as it will allow you, in my personal life, if somebody wakes me up at night and says, what's Joe Garcia? I'll say, well, that's my Postman collection. I'm sure you know exactly what I'm going to ask, and I don't care what happened. Probably some lawyers got hold of that. But tell me what's happening with it going forward,
Sure.
And what is the alternative, because that was an invaluable tool for all of us.
Yes.
And I'd like to know what's happening.
I agree. So for those of you who may not know, right, there is a Postman collection that is published on the Postman website it documents all of our services APIs, so that you can just take that collection and go to town against all of our services to figure out how you want to automate. Now, recently at CyberArk, our IT security made the decision, after working with Postman for quite a while, to disable our access to Postman. It was determined that the idea that online access was required and our collections and environments were being synchronized to the cloud, we did not want, for any reason, any of our intellectual property to end up in that cloud. So we are no longer able to use Postman at a corporate level because of that reason. Now, that has stunted my ability to be able to continue updating the Postman collection. It's basically frozen in time. But what I've been doing since then is working very closely with our technical writers to create a new website where we're taking all of the Postman collections, converting them to open API specifications in the latest version, and we're going to be publishing those back at api-docs.cyberark.cloud. And that website's available today. The identity API docs are already publicly available there, so you can get a good glance at what every other service is going to look like. So we're just finalizing this right now. All of the collections have been imported into the tool we're using for this. We're finalizing the schemas so that you guys not only get to take away an open API specification that you can load into your API gateways and your API clients, but also you'll be able to allow your developers now to not have access to any CyberArk service, and they'll be able to fully mock their API through these open API specifications. So it's really the journey that developers wanted to take in the first place in an official capacity coming to you directly from CyberArk, where there will be official support and maintenance in that documentation. So it's really a better place that we're going to be going to that will be able to universally accept everyone, because other organizations we found are also getting Postman disabled for the same reasons that we've disabled it at the corporate level. So hopefully that helps answer things. We're kind of in that lull gap of like waiting for the API docs to appear, but we've got a lot of great panelists here. So let's get a question from live chat, and then we'll come back to the audience. So in live chat, we had a question from someone out on Twitch asking, does CyberArk support third-party multi-factor authentication platforms using maybe APIs and plugins, or only on its own? And I think that's a great question for Anna to maybe tackle. What do you think, Anna?
Absolutely. So on the workforce side, we work with our own MFA, and I'll tell the audience, give it a try if you have access to. But we can also integrate. We have integrations with Duo. We absolutely support. I'm trying to read the Ubi keys, hardware tokens. We also do other ways. So the best way would be, I would suggest to talk to one of our team, and we can discuss what options you have. Our MFA is awesome, by the way. And I get people that sometimes have use cases where their users they don't want to buy a YubiKey or a hardware token to everybody, and they have simple use cases. It's not for the IT personnel, but maybe it's a factory. I have a cheese factory for Canadians that love poutine. They actually make the cheese for poutine, and they needed to do something in the factory, and they couldn't use phones and things like that. We support other methods, even security questions, which are not, I know some people might cringe, but it's still better than nothing when you have that. And you can decide per role of users or per group of users what type of MFA factor you want to apply.
Thank you. Awesome. Great answer. Let's take one from the audience. You in the back. He's had his hand up quite a long time. I don't want him to have it fall off.
Yes. Hey, Joe. Hello, everyone.
How
This question may be for Anna again.
Okay.
So secure browser, right? Like I think it took almost 1 year, like since like we announced that last Impact and launched this year, this time, you know. So are you going to make it available to general public, or it will be only for?
Can you say again? I missed it.
So is secure browser going to be available for general public in future, or is it going to be only for CyberArk customers and partners?
Secure browser is going to be for everyone.
Yeah, I don't know if I know the answer yet. That might be a better question for PM later on. They have the PM session.
2
Right
o'clock.
now, it's for customers only. It's not chargeable. And any customer that purchase SaaS solutions, that right now it's included. Customers that are in subscription model might have access to, and so the renewal will include as well. And if you are not renewing and you don't have anything new to purchase, talk to your account executive. We might be able to do that as well. So there might be plans, but I'm not allowed to talk about the future. It's not my decision, but PM will be able to comment on that.
That was the
Thank
legal
you.
notice at the beginning. But that's why we have that session right after lunch with PM that you can go and ask them in front of everyone so they can give you a good answer. Let's take another one from the audience.
Sorry.
Okay, so I think that's a question for Darren and maybe to you, Joe, as well.
Okay.
So we spoke about the topic that we should not try to boil the ocean when we speak about machine identities and all that. So we have also a bit of background of identity management. There you have a drive of risk, and you say, okay, I base this on risk. What kind of factors would you consider in the container world to identify it's a risky app, it's not a risky app? Is it just on the business impact, or do you have other factors in mind when we speak about risk?
Want me to take it?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's excited.
You're excited?
Yeah,
Sure.
I'll text you.
We'll split the time, right? Because the containers are my
You're
jam.
going to get some great answers.
So all of those things, yes. How do you, if I summarize the question, it's basically, I got a container, I got all these apps at scale. How do I decide which one to focus on first, right? If I may. All right, perfect. And yeah, risk of the business, that's definitely a big one, right? What's going to happen? I like to think of the reactive scenarios of if I were to get this call at 3 a.m. on a Thursday morning, how bad do I anticipate that be if it was application X, right? And I sort of let that be my guiding star, right? If there's all of a sudden the CEO calls me and it's because this one particular app, but it only had one pod or one container, then I'm definitely going to focus on that one first. Let that guide. And then it's a combination of, and you'll have that information in your gut, right? That's one of those gut feelings, like this is definitely something very pivotal to the business. And then after that, it's a combination of, well, how prevalent is it out there, right? Are we talking about one app that's got 1,000 containers and spread across multiple places and so many people are touching? And the thing I'm getting across here is the access points for some sort of human error to come into play. The more applications, the more containers, the more people that's going to be involved, greater risk if something happens to that then enables something else. So then scale and the amount of people that are impacting that would be the next two things that I would focus on. And now I'm just going to shut up and let James get a piece in.
So the other thing that I'll say is Darren's talking a lot about like, what is the business doing, right? If you're an insurance company and it's like your billing application and that's how you make your money from delivering the services to your customers, right? You collect it. That's a huge part of the equation. One of the things that I try to do is I try to think about the non-direct business impact and sort of think about more of the technical, what does it mean when an application has access to something? And so one of the things we talk about with the CyberArk blueprint is these concepts of level of privilege, scope of influence, ease of compromise as being universal factors, regardless of what access the data is. Every organization's got different data sensitivity, data privacy, all that jazz, right? So if you know that Kubernetes application, the actual workload itself, what is it accessing, right? Is it an administrator access to another system? Is it accessing 10 systems, 100 systems, 1,000 systems? Is it, accessing, I don't know, part of the identity stack again, right? To go do some other sort of task, right? It's sort of understanding the web of access that exists and how damaging that access can be is a pretty universal thing to know. So even just from that perspective, that's a really good way to say, do we have any apps that touch a ton of data or a ton of different systems, right? As opposed to being very narrowly scoped. That's another big factor that we try to talk about as being an influence as well. So.
Thanks, James. We'll take one question in the corner. I think there was somebody who had a question back here. And then we can all enjoy lunch. I'm sure you're all hungry. I don't want to keep you any longer.
How you doing, Joe? So I had another question for Anna. For the secure browser, do you see it as the one browser to replace them all, or is it really just a complement to your current browser for when you need secure access to something?
So I think I'll answer and then I will let Jared answer because it's also this space. I see as if it was me, I would start with those people that need access to sensitive corporate applications. I would still have a second browser for personal stuff. Like because I work with the identity side and I also do demonstrations all the time for password manager, the workforce password manager, that password manager to everyone. I use a lot of browser profiles, right? And I keep very separate. So my work computer is work only. However, and then and I have one profile that I use for my work. So it's everything that is in our CyberArk identity that is managed by IT. And when I do anything that is working related, and then all lab, I use different profiles. So I envision exactly like that. If you're going to access CyberArk, you're going to access any other application, sensitive application in your organization, you use the secure browser. But if you want to go check the news, or if you want to check personal email, and you are allowed to do that in your organization, that should be in a different browser. It doesn't need to be the secure browser. And actually, you can, if you want, you can protect that only certain applications or only applications in your IDP. Or others you can allow to an allow list so that anything else we just don't allow in that browser. Does that make sense?
It does, thank you.
Jared, do you want to add anything?
I mean, I could, I don't know if it's gonna be any benefit.
But you're wearing an identity security shirt.
I mean, just to piggyback on what Brandon said, right, from the typical user having been, boots on the ground at one point, watching how users interact with browsers, as the exception to the rule when it comes to a user profile on a browser, I mean, how many people out there think their users know how to create a secondary profile, right, in their browser? So there's stuff that you can do today, even without the secure browser, right? The secure browser, like Anna said, is great if there are applications that you need higher level of sensitivity, maybe for your IT users, or even for other people that aren't your traditional IT users, Salesforce developers, ServiceNow developers, people that are using accounts that intrinsically, when you think of privilege, it doesn't stand out like right in front of your face. But when you start thinking about like what James said, like what's the risk if something were to happen to that account? What would be the downstream effects? Those are the ones you want to start thinking about to be able to secure. But before you even get to that, the most important thing, I mean, we see it in a lot of these breaches, is taking those foundational critical controls that you have in your arsenal today to be able to go through and start with the bare minimum of low-hanging fruit, securing your existing browser environment, right? And if you know that you're an organization that allows Chrome, you're an organization that allows Edge, you don't have any restrictions on Firefox, think about that from a policy perspective as well, because if you allow those three browsers and maybe you're really, you have some users, talking about Opera, right? I always talk about Opera because I think it's funny. Use those controls that you can have and make sure that you're disabling, people from syncing their personal accounts in their browser to their home computer, right? Making sure they can't just install any browser extensions, right? And making sure you do it for every single browser environment in your organization, right? Because if you do it in Chrome and you're like, we're not gonna do it in Firefox or, Edge, it's too much work to manage these three, it's why even bother doing it for one? It's just a way to go around and do it. So start with those foundational controls that you have and look at all the different environments that you have that people could browse the web with, lock those down, and then you can go ahead and start thinking about what apps do you really need to put some additional security controls on top of that the CyberArk secure browser could bring to the table.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate you all coming by, hanging out, listening to us. This is it, man. This is the end of it. So, future, I'm gonna do this, and everybody's probably gonna cringe, but like, subscribe to me on YouTube and come check out like a live stream or something, okay? Thank you all, and go enjoy lunch, and we'll chat.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
And everybody online, stay secure.